am Elke Govertsen, and as stated, I have been a lot of things in my life. As a teenager, I was a welder, and we built boats. And now I'm the mother of sons, and I'm building men, I guess. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I publish a magazine called Mamalode. And what all of these things that I've done in my life have in common is they're actually all these kind of big things, these big projects, or these big series of problems, and that each of them actually need to be broken down into tiny, tiny solutions for me to really tackle them. And so what I wanted to talk to you about today is something that is a really big problem, and that's self-esteem. 85% of the world at any given moment is suffering from low self-esteem. So of the 100 or so people in this room, there's 85 of us that are having a bad time. And that number, not only is it kind of heartbreaking and sad, it's also really scary, because low self-esteem is the universal common denominator with addictions and violent crimes and suicide and bullying and all of these big things, these big societal ills. So we've got this thing, self-esteem, and how do we break that down into maybe a tiny solution or tiny series of solutions? So let's look at it in a simple way. I like simple solutions here. So we're gonna look at this bell curve. And when I first started thinking about this as a bell curve, what I saw was low self-esteem on one end and high on the other. But the more I learned and the more I read, the more I realized that's not so true. What's actually happening is high self-esteem somewhere is on the top of that bump. Kind of caps out around this feeling of contentment. What we actually have on the extreme end is the blinding powers of narcissism and greed. And those are actually, again, rooted back in low self-esteem. So now we have this bump that's low to content, back to low. And what do we do with that? And there's not that much we can do there, and it's kind of scary. You feel a little stuck, like there's no really good end to go. Unless you change that picture, and you take the low and you bring them together because they're the same thing. Now we have a circle. And a circle is something we really can do something with. Because self-esteem isn't just an issue of media or gender alone. I mean, those are big factors, but there's also this personal responsibility to the self-esteem crisis that we need to acknowledge. And that's our own talk of ourselves and our constant critique of each other. And so what I've found that helps me is this little trick, this tiny little trick. And what's interesting about this trick is I actually found it in an incredibly horrible and low place for myself. So my 2013, it sucked. And so much that I had to put it on a slide. It was awful. The people that I loved the most were having terrible, terrible times. And those are their stories to tell, not mine. But my story is this. It's that in my love for them, I dang near destroyed myself. The strongest muscle in my body, not that I'm like super strong, but the strongest muscle in my body did become that one where you're trying not to cry and you're like holding it back. You all know that feeling. I assume you all, at least 85% of you know that feeling. That trying not to cry feeling became the strongest muscle that I had. And my personal life was this like giant ball of flames, right? So in my attempt to create balance, I just took my professional life and made it huge and crazy and stressful and just as big. Apparently, you can simplify as a way to achieve balance, but that's not in my wheelhouse. So everything got big. I was traveling and working, and then I would come home and I would fight, and I did enormous amounts of personal work trying to find my way through this. And then all of a sudden, I started realizing that tight feeling in my throat, that trying not to cry feeling, you know what? It was there all the time, even when I wasn't sad. And then I started realizing my legs, they didn't feel like muscles anymore. They felt like paper bags that were filled with sand or glitter, something like dry and scratchy and hard. And I was at an event far from home, all the way in Montreal, Canada, when it became really clear to me that I wasn't just stressed or exhausted or burned out, that there was really, truly something physically wrong with me. But what I did was I smiled and I made it through my event, because my never give upness was this hallmark quality of mine. And then I was home and I was wheezing when I'd walk up the stairs. then all of a sudden I was wheezing when I was sitting and wheezing when I was lying down. And I was waking myself up at night choking because I couldn't breathe. I'm not breathing. I mean, the metaphor is not lost on me here. And that never give upness quality of mine almost lost my sons their mother. And I sounded like Darth Vader. And it was this enormous amount of work for me to manually pull air in. And then I had to push it back out. And that was how I was breathing. And, excuse me, it was exhausting. And I was forced to lie very, very still, which is also not a skill that's so much in my wheelhouse. And lying still was incredibly uncomfortable for me because then I had to really look at myself. And I had to think about that never give upness and my passion and all of my ideas and all my enthusiasm and my staying power and my willingness to go there with people. All of those things, all of those qualities about myself that I used to really love, they cost more than they were worth. And I began to hate the parts of me that I once loved. And then I'm really stuck there because not only can I not physically move, I'm laying in this miserable soup of not loving myself very much and not liking any of the things that I had been praised for my whole life. And so there I was. It was a pretty awful place to be, and I felt very physically stuck, and I couldn't distract myself in any way. But what started to emerge from that awful place was this idea that, okay, so if my best qualities are my worst, could the inverse be true? Could they be both at the same time? And so I started to kind of look at myself and let those best things be my worst, but also come back around. And I started to like myself a little bit more. And so I started to look at my sons this way. And I started to look at my struggling marriage this way. And I started to look at my friends and their qualities. And like my friend from high school, who he's amazing and successful because the rules just never applied to him and he could always find the workaround. But those same qualities actually just make him like the worst boyfriend ever. And the girlfriend of mine who's so intense that she could just crack her own self open, and that quality is what makes her the best listener I've ever met. And how, when looked through this lens, nothing was entirely good or entirely bad. And this started to create enormous shifts in me and around me. And so we finally figured out what was wrong with me, what was wrong with my breathing. I had, my airway was closed up, almost all the way with scar tissue, from an injury that I had gotten being intubated 12 years ago for a surgery. Because apparently I'm one of those people who has to touch the white hot light of my own mortality every decade or so, like a bug flying into a bug zapper, I have to go there. But we knew what was wrong. And I had a surgery, and we were able to fix it. We opened my airway, and we're back to the circle. And I can breathe again. And I was able to breathe, and I was able to heal, and I was able to recover, and things started to change. But what I didn't want to change was this new lens that I had, and this way I was looking at myself and the world. And this lens is a tiny, tiny idea. It's not big and complex, it's tiny. Unless it isn't, unless we make it something bigger. So I publish a magazine called Mamalode, and it's a parenting magazine, but we don't do any how-to articles or recipes or things like that. What we ask people to do is to tell their true, honest stories. And when we're deciding which of those stories that come to us that we're gonna publish, I'll let you in on a secret here. Guts trumps all. And so to do this, to look at your best and try and find something that's your worst about it is really humbling. And to find a glimmer of greatness in your faults takes a mountain of work sometimes. And to tell your story in this way takes an enormous amount of guts. So let's pan it out a little. What if we parented this way? What if we looked at our children and instead of said, this was good and this was bad, which we do all the time, what if we let them be both at the same time? What if those things weren't just equal, but they were actually in a connected tandem? What if we let our kids be real and we let that be okay? And even more terrifying, what if we showed that version of ourselves to our kids? What if we said, hey, Mommy is so excited, and excitable. And that makes me sometimes really distracted, and I'm sorry. And Dad, he is a perfectionist, but it's because he wants to be the very best he can be for you. What if we took it even further? What if we applied this lens to politics and religion and culture? What if we applied this to what is probably the most powerful institution of our time, branding? What if we had companies that were willing to give both their good and their bad in their messaging? Show me a politician or a political party who's willing to talk about their negatives as well as their positives. I mean, hell, just let me go to a dinner party where instead of asking, what do? We ask questions that are like, what's your best quality and how has at some point that been your worst? Give me the opportunity for us to tell our stories in ways that are true. So true that they hold both the light and the dark in their hands at the same time. And so now for the personal accountability part of this. Look around the room. No, really. Look around the room at each other. I'm not going to make you tell each other your best and your worst qualities. I'm actually going to make you do something even a little bit more uncomfortable. You don't have to say it out loud, but I want you to think about how this entire day together, we've all been doing it, and we all do this, so I'm not pinpointing anyone. We've been making snap judgments and critiques of each other, of what are they wearing, or what are they saying, or the choices they make, or how they do this or that or the other. And I want you to, as soon as those thoughts, first of all, you have to acknowledge that you have them and own it, because we all do. But as soon as you have those thoughts and those memories of those judgments you've been making today, round them out. And let whatever it was you were being critical of also be something positive. And start practicing this, because you're doing it all of the time. And here's the thing. The reason we do this to each other all of the time, and this is a huge part of our self-esteem crisis, is because if we're projecting all of that stuff out, we don't really have to look at each other. And so we're going to do this today, here together. You know what we're going to do? We're going to kill the projection. Doesn't sound good? No, literally. Tech guy, I want you to kill my projector. Can we take it off? Is it coming off? It's off? Oh, it's still on my screen. Huh? I'm still projecting, but you're not. Well done. So we've killed the projection. We've done it. We are no longer projecting. And what this allows us to do is see what I think is the most important slide you might ever see in your life. I want you to look in this mirror, and I want you to think, gosh, what's my best worst? And I want you to dig deep and be true. And now, flip it and dig deeper and be truer. And deciding which way people go first, if they go best or worst first, that's a whole nother discussion. But either way, you're getting a bigger and fuller and gutsier version of yourself. And what I want you to do is I want you to take this and I want you to be unflinchingly honest. And then I want you to forgive. And then I want you to believe. And then I want you to take those two things and let them touch. And bring those two things together. And I want you to live in the inverse. And live in the inverse is where the best is the worst. And the worst is the best. And your bell curve is a circle. And it comes back together. Where the thing that you hate about yourself is okay. Because you need it. Or needed it at one point. Where those facades that we build so that people will like us, we acknowledge that those actually keep us truly and utterly alone. That my very good life, it could kill me if I let it. I want you to take this idea, this best worst idea, and I want you to take this tiny solution and invert that. Take this tiny solution and make it big. Because this right here, this is the most powerful idea out there, the real you. And you are an idea that's worth spreading. Thank you.